Hi guys, so we are on to part 2 of this video, of this lesson on the growth of a nation's economy. So we already talked about population growth when it came to the economy, Irish and German immigration into the United States and how that played with with this growing national economy. Today we are going to take some time to look at the growth of industry and how that played a part in the growing national economy. And FYI, I have a question. Did I say Google? Because my Google Assistant is yappering over there. So, without further ado, let's break down this growth of industry as it relates to this growing national economy and its effects of industry. In the 18th century, British inventors perfected a series of machines for mass productions of textiles, which initiated the European Industrial Revolution and gave Britain a head start in industry production. For many years, the British carefully guarded their industry secrets, forbidding the exports of machines or even descriptions of them and restricting the departure of informed mechanics. The British could not keep its secrets forever, and in 1789 Samuel Slater left Britain in disguise and arrived in America with his plans in his head for a textile machine that would spin cotton. He contracted with a merchant manufacturer in Rhode Island to build the machine, and in 1791 he created the first efficient American machinery for spinning cotton thread. By 1815, there were 130,000 cotton spindles turning in 213 factories. So Slater is often called the father of the factory system in America. So this guy named Slater, what did he do? Basically stole information from Britain about their industrial revolution and became father of the factory system. Father of the factory system. FS for short. Why was he considered the father of the factory system again? Because of his mechanics when it got into cotton spinning. Slater's cotton thread machine was a fabulous invention, but there was a shortage of cotton fiber to spin since it took the entire day for one slave to pick 1 pound a fiber and separate it from the seeds. In 1793, another mechanical entrepreneur, Eli Whitney, graduated from Yale and spent some time as a tutor on the cotton plantation in Georgia. While there, Whitney devised a mechanism for removing the seeds from the cotton fiber that was 50 times more efficient than the hand picking process. So another invention, Whitney made the cotton gin. And that produced cotton at a faster rate than the normal hand picking mechanisms. The machine was fairly simple to create, and by the time Whitney secured a patent in 1794, a number of copies has already been created. Although he did not see much profit from the cotton gin, Whitney had unintentionally begun a revolution. Cotton production soared, and the South became tied to King Cotton, and planters cleared more and more land for cotton growth. The North prospered from the fiber as it was shipped to the New England factories and processed in Slater's cotton thread machine. The Industrial Revolution in America began. So, what I want you to know about cotton and why cotton was the talk of the town in the South. Two simple things. Cotton equals moolah, moolah, endless moolah because of trade. So cotton equals moolah. And more slaves equals more what? More cotton. I didn't say it was a good philosophy morally, but this was their philosophy. More slaves equals more cotton. Up to this point in American history, manufacturing occupied in the household or in small local shops. Growth of the textile production industry was slow until Jefferson's embargo in 1807 and import restrictions during the War of 1812. Both actions stimulated the domestic production. As the Industrial Revolution took hold in America, it created the factory system and transformed agricultural production, communication, and transportation across the United States. New innovations advanced the Industrial Revolution. One of the most basic inventions of the time was adopted from Europe: the preservation of food by canning. By 1820, several major canneries were in full production in Boston and New York. So canneries became this big thing in America North as cotton did in the South. In 1798, Eli Whitney developed another innovation that spurred continued industrial growth in the North. Whitney won a governmental contract to manufacture muskets. He developed machine tools to make the parts of the musket so they were virtually identical, allowing them to be interchangeable. Based on Whitney's invention, factories for the mass production of firearms were built in the northern states. By the 1850s, Whitney's method for making muskets led to widespread adoption of the idea of interchangeable parts and eventually became the basis of modern assembly line production methods. So I want to just erase it. So this idea of interchangeable part became big when it came to modern day assembly lines. This was the start of the assembly line era. It has been said that Eli Whitney both started and ended the Civil War. He started by inventing the cotton gin, which made raising cotton more profitable and led to the increase in slavery based on that philosophy that we talked about. He ended it by developing a manufacturing process based on interchangeable parts that the North used in its factories, enabling the North to produce far more war goods than the South. Interesting. The 1840s brought a host of innovations. In 1844, Charles Goodyear patented the process for vulcanizing rubber, making it stronger and more elastic. Also in 1844, Samuel Morse transmitted the first intercity telegraph message 40 miles from Baltimore to Washington. So both telegraphs and vulcanizing rubber. In 1846, Elias Hose invented the sewing machine, which was then perfected by Isaac Singer. So that gave another boost to northern industry. Okay, the many technical advances shaped all aspects of Americans' lives: social, cultural, political, and economic. Living conditions were improved with luxuries such as central heat, indoor plumbing, underground water lines, sewer systems, and improved lighting. Technological advantage spurred laws of free incorporation, allowing corporations to be created without applying for individual charters. So various regions of the North began to specialize in specific industries based on the location and availability of natural resources. For example, New England became the center for textile mills, while Pennsylvania became the center of the production of iron. So all throughout the North and the South, industry was spurring. Several industries were spurring: the iron industry, the textile industry, the shipbuilding industry, the cotton industry, the agricultural industry, all throughout the country. As these innovations and technical advances were taking place, the Boston Associates, a group of merchants headed by Francis Cabot Lowell, added a new dimension of factory production. Many of the early factories used Samuel Slater's cotton spinning machine and set up hand looms, but the weavers could not keep up with the machines. In 1813, Lowell combined the spinning machines with power weaving machines at the Boston Manufacturing Company plant. Lowell focused on mechanization of the entire process for mass producing standardized cloth. The cloth was plain and rather coarse, but durable and cheap. So they were combining inventions and making newer and updating inventions. The Boston Associates used the Boston Manufacturing Company as a model for new factories. In 1823, they harnessed the power of the Merrimack River at East Chelmsford, Massachusetts, to develop a new plant. The town was approximately renamed Lowell, and within 3 years it had over 2,000 people. By 1850, factories based on the Wallam method produced 1/5 of the nation's total output on cotton cloth. In the new Lowell textile factories, the Boston Associates developed a labor system that employed young, unmarried women. So women were in factories. By the 1820s, young women came to the factory towns from farms all over New England. The women lived in boarding houses that were strictly supervised and earned between $2.50 and $3.25 per week, about half of which went for room and board. Often, the young women were not working to support themselves, but sending most of the money they made back home. Many worked simply for the excitement of meeting new people and to escape the confines of the farm for a few years before they married. A variety of educational and cultural opportunities offset, to some degree, unsafe and unhealthy conditions. So all this industry, this growth of industry, had some problems. And the problems they faced was labor cruelty. Unhealthy and no regulation. Labor cruelty, unhealthy conditions, and no regulation. And the saddest part about it is these three things won't get fixed or even talked about for several years. For several years. As the Lowell factories experienced booming growth, the conditions for the workers changed. The cities in which the textile factories operated became dirty, bleak industry cities. Wage cuts and deteriorating working conditions became the norm. As the demand for cheap labor grew, child workers also became vulnerable to unhealthy working conditions. Over half of the nation's industry workers in 1820 were children under the age of 10. Think about that for a second. Half of all industry workers in the country was less than 10 years old. During the 1830s and 1840s, textile practices and mill wages dropped. Workers organized strikes where they turned out to protest 12-hour workdays, wage cuts, and increasing cost for room and board. Although the protests were well intended, they did not force a reversal of policy. Skilled artisans and craftsmen could no longer compete with the low prices and high volume of factory goods, and many were forced to take factory jobs. The influx of these skilled workers into the workforce renewed the demand for better work conditions and a shorter work week. Prompted by the moniker Northern Wage Slave, many laborers undertook efforts to establish unions and create political organizations dedicating to advocating the interests of workers. In a landmark decision by the Massachusetts Supreme Court in the case of Commonwealth versus Hunt, the court ruled that forming a trade union was not illegal. While on the surface of this ruling looked to be significant for organized labor, it soon proved to be a symbolic gesture because those three things are not going to change for a while. And that's the con of this growth of industry. People will get hurt. By 1850, Samuel Slater's factory system had been fine-tuned, and industry was booming in the East. The New England and the Mid-Atlantic states had become the main centers of manufacturing and commerce. The primary products coming from the industrial centers in the North and the Mid-Atlantic at the time were textiles, lumber, clothing, machinery, and woolen goods. So that's it for part 2 of this lesson. We are going to wrap up with part 3, talking about the effects of all this. We laid out the pros and cons in this video. Cons being a big one, and this growth of slavery in the South. That's something I forgot. Thank you for reminding me myself. This is what's happening in the North. Labor cruelty, unhealthy conditions, and no regulations. This is also happening in the South. But the South calls it slavery. These cons in the South was the growth of slavery. That these are all the cons of the growth of the industry. See you guys in part 3 of this video, the last part, and it will be a much shorter video than the past 2, I promise. See you guys later.